You have to stop, you have to look, you have to listen, and you have to smell. Right now, the hunter is 339 meters away from me.
So I'm finding these big logs from fallen trees and literally walking on top of them. That's the only way I'm able to get through it. You guys can see this is just ridiculous. Those 2 bars have to last me until no later than 2300 tomorrow night. So I'm gonna take a minute, relax, sip some water. I only have 1 Canteen.
The survivor is approximately 600 meters to your southwest, and you will not get closer to him on the road from your position.
Hey, Brent Crew Cafe.
Sometimes you make the right decision whenever you're asking for something like this. Very true. It's a gamble.
There's a drone up.
All right, grunts. Welcome to the after party for episode 4 of the SERE Challenge, season 2. This is the one where Randall gets drunk and tells all the whiny soy boys to go pound sand. Oh, no, wait, wrong episode. This is the live chat of the episode. My bad. We got it. Okay, we'll get it. So let me bring in the contestants. There is Brent and Jared. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, bruh.
What's up, brother?
All right, so Brent's out there. He's doing his thing, doing a good job. Jared's out there kicking ass. Let's talk about tactics. So Brent did a really good job at showcasing pretty much all of his movement, everything that's going through his mind. So let's talk about terrain, Brent. The terrain sucks ass. The Manzanita is pretty much the winner in this competition. But how are you using all that terrain to your advantage?
So yeah, it's terrible, right? The Manzanitas are real thick, particularly in the first several hours. And that is to my advantage because the hunter, I believe, is less inclined to come into that shit, right? So if I can keep massive amounts of Manzanitas between him and I, two things, like I'll hear him coming and it's less enticing for him to come in there and try to come after me. So I did feel like where we're at in this particular part of the series, the terrain kind of started to open up some. So like I felt like most of the heavy Manzanitas, although I will run into some from time to time, but most of the heavy stuff is really behind me. But just trying to navigate through that stuff, it showed in the video this last episode. Like occasionally you'll come across a part where like a fallen log had fallen on them, and you can literally get on top of them and walk on top of the Manzanitas. It's nuts. And every once in a while, God throws you a bone and you get that. So that's just, you just got to deal with it. You got to find and navigate through that stuff some way, somehow.
Yeah. And so what's I think we're showing off really well this time is these patches of Manzanita. You get into them basically crawling through like rabbit holes. They're not really game trails. Like the last episode, you're crawling on your belly through them. So now you have gotten, I believe, about 1,800 foot of elevation gain. And so I'm happy to show that off. There was a really accurate way I was able to track. Well, I know y'all's routes, but I was able to show off your actual elevation gain. So you've been out there for, I think, 6 hours, and you've climbed 1,800 feet. And Jared has actually climbed a little bit more than you because he's going up and down trying to stay ahead of you. So what does that do to your tactics and just your I guess physically and mentally? Like what does that do to you climbing that terrain?
I mean, it's just wearing and tearing. I think it's important to note people need to understand. Like, I don't have any intel really on where the extraction point is at this point in the show. I've got no intel on that. I just know I'm heading northeast, right? And although I get like hourly sit reps on approximate locations of the enemy, like I don't know exactly where he's at. And there were several times trying to make a movement through that terrain, and it's so noisy, like Jared said in the show. You feel like you're just stomping through and just like like how can they not hear me coming? So there's several times where you get to places that you're looking and it almost looks like you see the hunter silhouette, right? Like right around a bend, and you're like, oh fuck, and it holds you up and like you can't move, and it's like you got to sit there and wait. You're trying to wait it out, and then all of a sudden it turns out no, it's just like a burnt stump or something. So there were a couple times where that happened to me, where like I thought I saw Jared and I thought he was like setting up an ambush. He's waiting for me to step a little closer, and I had to stop and wait, and it turned out to be nothing. It's your own mind playing tricks on you. So there's that element too. But there was so much unknown. Like I said, I get those, hourly sit reps, which I didn't even have a watch. So it's like, I didn't even know when my hour hit. I had to go like, I think it's been an hour. Let me see if, it's time for a sit rep or not. So, and that was another aspect that's hard to portray in the series, is like my perception of what time it was. Like going through that, because I was up all night essentially, and starting so early, going through this, like I thought it was a lot later than it actually was, and that may or may not show up in some of the later episodes. But I remember thinking it was like sun was going down, and it was actually like high noon.
Yeah, I'll put that in my notes to mention that next time. But I'm glad you mentioned how cryptic your updates are. We keep it like that for the survivor because that's also part of the isolation. Like you're out there on your own, and last year we went out and met the survivor with like batteries and their food and stuff, and this time, like in this episode, you just got 2 freaking power bars, 200 calories each. That, and climbing 1,800 feet so far, that ain't nothing. Plus 1 canteen. So all that, dealing with the terrain, not knowing where the hunter is, and then getting just horrible intel updates, that's all part of like the mind game. And so I don't know if people caught it in this last episode, but I showed a couple of your intel updates, and I didn't tell you were assuming where people were based on, like Stoker yelling at you with the bullhorn, but I didn't confirm or deny that. I would just give you your guidance. So like stay put or shift course or something like that. And so I'm glad you mentioned that. So Jared, you're basically relocating in this one. You're using that one-time relocation perk, and I think Stoker did a pretty good interview on that. But what's your strategy after relocation? So what should people be seeing coming up in this next episode with you relocating up there?
Well, when I was relocating, I felt like I was really behind the ball on him. I thought he had gotten way ahead of me, and of course, you're playing these mind games with yourself with these things, and it probably helped me a little bit. But I also felt that it was wasted at the moment. In the moment, I think it did put me pretty close to him at one point, but then I got an intel update right after my relocate that said I could not get any closer to him from where I was at. And I was fairly close at that point, but it was just because of the manzanitas and the vegetation and the terrain that I was not able to get to them. So at that point, I walked back up on top and just kind of reassessed everything and waited for my next intel update. And at that point is whenever I went up to the endpoint, and when I used my drone perk. But the terrain down there was just so not just the terrain, but the manzanitas were so thick. It was grabbing pieces of my gear, and I think you showed it in the episode that it grabbed my pouch that I had on the back of my belt, and it pulled it right off. So it probably came loose earlier and just didn't notice it. But when it fell off, luckily I noticed it right away. So at that point, I put it back on and kind of reassessed my whole gear situation, made sure everything was tied down. I didn't want to be like Bill and lose a piece of gear out there.
Yeah, and so to answer this question real quick, the hunter has to be within arm's length of the survivor. That's how we wrote this one. So basically within distance to capture the dude. And just to add to that, the scouts are not allowed to capture the survivor. So the scout could be standing there and the survivor's right in front of him. And he could basically just call the hunter and say, yep, I got a dude right here in front of me. That would still be bad for the survivor. But Jared, you talk about feeling like he got ahead of you. Just to make sure people know this, like you're kind of chasing the intel updates. So as the hour goes by, you know about where the survivor was, but it takes a whole hour before you figure out if your strategy is working out or not. So you're kind of playing cat and mouse with them. And we, like in the episode, you would be given like 300 to 600 meters. Sometimes that would actually be 150 to 200 meters. Just to keep you guys right on top of each other. But, I just wanted to point out that I didn't think you were feeling that the guy was getting around you. It's like you actually can see that he's progressing and you're just kind of chasing him. So I like watching the footage and going through it. I thought that was a good call. And while I was out there watching you do it, because Brent was making really good progress, and the way he was moving, you basically would have had to get called in right on top of him. And Stoker gave you some updates to walk you right into him. And then you either didn't get right on top of him or you chose to just sit in your LPOPs. So you guys can you throw out some more questions and we'll get to them. So Brent, when let's talk about the harassment from Bill. I remember last year people were kind of dogging on that, but what kind of effect did that have on you, having Stoker over there with a bullhorn yelling at you?
Well, I mean, it stopped me in my tracks because, he's out there with that, loudhailer, and it sounds a lot closer than, just when you put up on the episode, the map, he's a lot farther than I thought he was. I thought he was a lot closer than that. Also, when you guys see me start walking after that loudhailer incident, I start walking down and I go into like a creek. I thought that was a trail. And I heard the ATV roll up and stop. And I'm like thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, fuck, this is a trail in front of me. And, he stopped somewhere on this trail in front of me and he's loud hailing. And like, I can't cross this trail right now because he might be able to see me. He might be a little ways down, but he can still see down this trail. And so that stopped me in my tracks for a while. Like, I don't know how long I laid there, maybe an hour, trying to wait until it calmed down, but like I couldn't move. In my head, it was a trail right in front of me that he could ride down. I kept waiting for that quad to go down it. And then when it finally stopped and he finally left and I started to make my way down there, I was like, oh crap, this is a dry creek and it's nothing but a bunch of like, dead logs and stuff down here. Like he couldn't have ridden down here anyways. So I felt like I lost time because like reality is I could have actually pushed through, because at the time I was like thinking, hey, this loud hailing is great because, I can use it as cover for my movement. But then when I thought that there was a trail in front of me that he could ride down and or see me, I was like, crap, I can't cross this until this is done, until he's out of here. So yeah, it absolutely had an effect. It delayed me at least an hour. And at this point, I'm getting closer to the end point. I mean, I have no idea that I'm that close to the end point, but you know, had I been able to continue to move there, I would have been a lot closer than I ended up being.
Did you think did you think the hunter was over there near the scout when Bill was out there yelling at you?
Oh yeah, I figured he was in the area. So you know, I didn't like the fact that I had to hunker down, and the next thing I know, I got a drone you know, coming in. So it's like, you know, at that point, I would say at that point in the challenge, I thought the survivor or the hunter was very close, and you know, it was kind of like a make or break situation. So at least that's in my head, because like I said, the you know, the loud hailer, the drone that ended up flying over, you know, I figured Jared was in the AO. He was close.
All right, so here's a question for you. Why doesn't the survivor build man traps and catch a wild boar to eat? They are allowed to do that. They can do whatever they want. So Brent, why didn't you snag some food out there?
Well, I had 24 hours to make it to the endpoint, and again, I had no idea how far the endpoint was for me. So in my mind, this thing was probably like 10 miles away, and I had to keep on the move. And you know, you guys will probably hear. I say probably because I haven't seen the episode, so I don't know what's going to be shown or not. But routinely throughout this challenge, you know, I'm filming myself and saying like, "Hey, at some point, I'm going to have to start looking for a shelter for the night, and you know, and building, you know, some sort of survival something, you know, building a fire and everything else." So again, like I can't put in perspective. Like I had no idea where the endpoint was, so. You know, those two granola bars were going to have to last me, you know, however long that could go. So a human body can go a long time without food. It's water. Water's the big, you know, red flag.
Yeah. So this question, how close was Brent to the scout when he could hear the radio? That's right toward the end before the drone comes up. That was actually, it's after Stoker drops off Jared, but that's both Bill and the other scouts' radio. So they were out there on the ground on that same trail, really close to you. I didn't get any footage of that. That's why it's not in that episode. But I did notice watching it live, you could hear some of that radio traffic when you mentioned it. That's why I put that in there, to make sure people knew you had people walking all over you. But I see a common theme of survival questions popping up. So see if I can pull them up real quick. We're talking about Brent using survival techniques to tell time, techniques he could have used. And let's just remind people that, you know, there's the survival shows where you're out there doing all this crafty stuff, and that's all good stuff. They're good things to learn and know. But you got to remember, if somebody's actually out there hunting you, and you have scouts out there on the ground looking for you and stuff, like there's a lot of things you're going to have to drop. So like a lot of the arts and crafts stuff, a lot of those go out of the window. So that's probably why you guys aren't seeing some of the stuff you're used to seeing in shows, is because you got to remember, you know, if you're building something or doing any kind of extra work out there in the woods, like you're risking a dude just coming up on you. That's probably why you don't see Brent out there punching hogs and starting barbecues. You know, the smoke and smell, he's done for.
Don't forget whittling a spoon for my evening meal and
lashing a chair together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's another one. Are there any natural water sources out there in the brush and food? And so we covered this in the last live talk. That season, there's like one fairly decent water source, but that's about it. So that's why I give them that canteen. They can eat the manzanita berries, and I did tell them that. So I didn't see any of it on the videos. I guess we'll figure out if some of them grab some or not.
I'm sure I probably did eat some, but not intentionally.
Yeah. So
Hey,
Brent, how high off the ground were you when you were balancing on those logs?
oh man, it's hard to tell. Maybe 5 or 6 feet. And there are times when I was on top of manzanitas climbing over them that I was at least 6, 7 feet up in the air. I mean, it was crazy. And there was one time, I don't know if my camera is running or not, but I actually fell like through them and I had my legs dangling and I didn't even touch the ground. I had to pull myself back up to get back on top of the manzanitas to continue to move on top of them. So that log bridge was really cool though. When I saw that, I was like, man, this is like, I can't believe this is like natural. You know what I mean? Like it looks so like man-made, but it was legitimately like a big, huge tree that fell over and then broke and snapped and like turned 45 degrees and I'm literally like walking over it and then having to get over. So it was
There
really
was
cool.
there was a lot of those out there, and it
Yeah.
was good because you can get another 20, 30, 40 feet ahead of you relatively quickly without trying to crawl through the crap.
Yeah.
And then you get to the other side, and then you're slowed and bogged down again trying to crawl through it. But yeah, if you would have fallen off these logs, you're going down into the abyss of the manzanitas, and now you're trying to either crawl your way back up or out laterally.
Yeah. All right. So did anybody's uniform get torn up out there where you had to make repairs besides Jared's pouch falling off?
I don't think I may have gotten some small cuts in my cami trousers, but that was one of the reasons why I wore the leggings, the gaiters, because I knew going through that stuff because I watched season 1 that stuff was going to be super thick, and I wanted to get extra ankle support and more protection on my shins because I knew they would get jacked up. So I wore those gaiters, and there were still like a lot of cuts and stuff on my shins, even though I was wearing those gaiters. So I can't imagine what it would have been like without those gaiters on.
Yeah. I mean, the stuff you guys are wearing, you got the old school BDUs and Jared had the, you have multicams or UCPs or OCPs?
UCPs, yeah. Well, it was multicam, OCP, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's a heavy duty 50-40 cotton poly mix. That's pretty good stuff for out there. So, like if you're talking about a ghillie suit, we would cut up our duffel bags and put those on like bad areas that could go to shit. But yeah, I think the only person that really got torn out up there was Eric last year because he was in short sleeves. So here's another one. Brent, did you actually see the drone or only hear it?
Oh no, I saw it. I saw it a couple times. So most of the time you hear it first, obviously. But there were a couple times that I did actually see it up in the air.
Yeah, you could see it last year over Stoker. And this year in that footage, I couldn't see it, but I knew you would have been able to see it visually because we'd put them right on you. So let's talk about that. Both of you guys, well, we'll get into the next one later, but, Jared was avoiding that perk a lot. And so the common theme is kind of like the drone doesn't help too much. But Brent, what did the drone do to you psychologically when you heard it and when you would see it? Did it affect you at all? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Like you don't it makes you not want to move, right? It makes you want to hunker down and get underneath vegetation so you're not seen. So absolutely, when it's up on the air, especially if it's like right in your vicinity above, like psychological effect is like, hey, I don't want to move. I'm going to hunker down and wait until this thing is like, flies away. So there's absolutely an aspect. I think, and I'm not going to jump the gun, but I think I could speak for Jared. He probably wouldn't concur that when it comes to choosing, whether you get an intel update or go with the drone, you tend to favor the intel update because it's, so valuable. The information is so valuable.
Is that
I would have taken the intel update over anything else out there.
Yeah. So we're going to make some major changes next year for that So, but yeah, the drone definitely, even when I was out there later on meeting people, a drone came up and I was like, damn it. Because, Brent, you don't know who's looking at that feed and what they're going to do with it. So, in this one, we'll get into it in the next episode, but I don't mind sharing that. In this one, Jared is actually sitting there looking at the feed. So, but the survivor doesn't know that. The hunter could be out there on the ground getting intel off of that feed. So
yeah, on that note, when I heard the drone, I thought, oh, that's his perk. He's using it. He's sitting there staring at a screen. So it's like I knew there was one part which I don't think it was used in the episode, but it happened earlier, that I heard the drone, but it was nowhere near me, right? So in my head, I was like, well, they're checking out an area that is nowhere near me. They're looking at the wrong area, and Jared is standing there right next to the drone operator. So this was like confirmation in my head that like, hey, I'm on the right track. They have no clue where the hell I am because I hear this drone somewhere else, and Jared's staring at a screen. So reality is you guys could have just, been getting some footage or something. But in my head, judging by the previous season, that's what I thought was going on.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We had the drone up a lot, so getting footage and all that. But the thing is, we didn't tell the contestants when we were putting it up just to get shots. So, those things are loud. So, like I think I mentioned in this episode, I was going to put mine up. Stoker was telling me Jared didn't want it. So I'm like, I'm going to put it up to get some shots. And I'm pretty sure you heard that flying over your head too. Because I was doing, circles and stuff up there. And it crossed our minds. Like, what if the contestants here? And was like, well, fuck them. They don't need to know if it's part of it or not. They should deal with it how they would deal with it. So kind of part of the game. This guy's asking what kind of gaiters you were wearing. Were they issued or...
No, they're just you can still find them relatively cheap. They're Swiss military surplus from like, I don't know, maybe the 70s or 80s, probably possibly even 90s. But they're like $15 a pair, maybe $20 a pair now. But I bought those from like Sportsman's Guide years ago and just spray painted them kind of a woodland camouflage, and I've been using those for years. Not just at the SERE challenge, but like at winter forage and stuff like that.
I was curious about them too when you pulled them out. Did those help with snow also?
Yeah. It helps keep the snow from getting inside there and subsequently getting your like socks wet, and just keeping debris out and stuff like that.
Yeah, manzanita berries. So I was going to show this talking about terrain. This is just one of the graphics I used. So people that are paying attention in the episodes, Brent started off with a northeasterly guidance, and he basically keeps getting that, but I don't know if people caught it. I kept showing this graphic. He's almost heading easterly. It's barely northeast. So all of that is because of the terrain. So Brent, you keep trying to head northeast and something keeps blocking you from going northeast. So are you aware of that? Did you know that until you saw these graphics, or were you thinking you were heading mostly northeast?
No, I don't, I'm looking at my compass. I'm looking, I'm dead reckoning and stuff like that. But like you're saying, there's, key terrain that's blocking certain aspects, something like the scenario that happened earlier with the loud hailing and stuff. I felt like he was right there in the direction I was heading. So it's like I couldn't go that. And I don't even there's some footage probably that didn't get used where I had to change directions. I started heading west for a little bit because my intel update was like, nope, you can't head north or northeast because the enemy's there. They're up there significantly. So I had to start going west for a while, and then it's like, my next update that I got was, your northeast is now more open. It's clear. You can start resuming your path. So yeah, it was, terrain funneling and enemy intel and stuff like that. So
yeah, that one of those changes is going to come later. We'll show because that was a pretty significant event. It was almost a bad event. So that's going to come up. All right. So Jared, what you want to add, man?
Just the terrain just prevents you from doing so much out there. Not so much the terrain, the manzanitas. You, like Brent was saying, he was wanting to go northeast, but he was just going east, and he couldn't for a variety of reasons. But the manzanitas just dictated your travel and your route so much, unless you just plowed through it. So that was the hardest thing about the entire event, was just trying to navigate around and through the manzanitas out there.
Yeah, so I said this earlier, you're pretty much chasing the intel updates you get. So I showed that one scene where you kind of gave up and got your relocation, but you're chasing all these intel updates, and we're talking about 6 hours worth now. So how much is that affecting you being able to try to chase those intel updates? Like would you go, so you would get a direction and a distance to the survivor? How many times did that affect you actually heading that direction to where you had to box around some crap, or you had some deadfall to deal with and just gave up on your route, or if it affected you at all?
Well, you still go in the direction that you think the survivor's going. And then you might be heading in that direction for 20 minutes or so, and you come up to this major roadblock that you have to get around it somehow. And then by the time you get around it, it's another 20 or 30 minutes, and you're getting your next intel update, and it's even further away from where you were where you started from the previous one. So you kind of backtrack a little bit, I think, or at least I did, and try to reset so you can just keep. My thing was, I wanted to get in front of him and hopefully have him cross in front of me. That was my main strategy. I wanted to get in front of him and get in his path so he crossed in front of me, so I could at least get some kind of a visual or an audible on him at some point.
All right, so you're really just trying to do your thing, and you're dealing with the terrain just like Brent is. And by the way, guys, the hunter doesn't get a map either. He just gets basically all the guidance he wants. So, like we showed Stoker saying, they had a scout out on a trail for him that he sent him out to look for something, and then Stoker added, like where you are, you're not going to get to the survivor. So they get a lot more support on that. And with that being said, the scouts they're doing their hourly runs, which means they're also out there walking through the brush and stepping through all this stuff and kind of seeing if they can flush out the survivor. So we didn't get too much footage of that because the hunter, Jared, was usually keeping them engaged. But they were out on the ground. Like the other guy, he's not going to be mentioned on YouTube. His nickname is Raven. So he was out there walking around a lot. And I gave them guidance like, hey, you can walk right up on the survivor. And if you see him, you can call the hunter and say, hey, give him a polar where you are in reference to the hunter and say, hey, I got a guy down here. And, it just didn't work out that way. I saw another question that I'd like to address. So in real SERE training, how do they simulate the psychological and interrogation part since the trainees know it's not real? That's a good one, man. I think we covered that a little bit with you guys after the first interrogation sequence with Brent. So when I went through it, yeah, it's training and you can kind of laugh at it and have fun with it. So the way they counteract that is by ramping up the environmental aspects of it. And so we did that with Brent by letting him freeze his ass off. So like I said, there's plenty of workouts we could have done with him. We could have put him in stress positions to, torture him a little bit. But making him sit in that chair immobile in 20-degree weather for hours, that's one way to get around that. Brent Brent knows, haha, these guys they're not gonna cut my PP off for real. They're not gonna burn me with cigars and stuff, but there's always ways to ramp up the intensity. And so Brent, you can add to that, but you guys will see with Jared, we'll get creative as well. So Brent, you knew it was all going to end and you knew we weren't actually going to tear you up, but let's just go over it again. What was bothering you for real during that interrogation part?
Well, like you said, I even if they were going to cut, I got several inches I could spare. So no, I'm kidding. Let's see, just
Liar.
Well, I know you're used to working with horses all the time, Jared. So, in any event.
Oh, he ran away. You started talking about horses and he disappeared.
Yeah, just I think the weather was probably the number one thing, just because all I'm wearing is some utilities out there and it's freaking 20 degrees, sitting in a metal chair, it's sucking your body heat out of you, so that sucks, and then the repeated playing of the songs, meow meow meow, over and over and over. So I mentioned your horses, Jared, and you took off running.
Yeah, I had to run away. I didn't hear that part. What did you say about him?
Oh, nothing. I was just talking.
He said something about inches and you got shy. So Jared's out there with a tape measure.
Yeah, I had to go measure something real quick.
Yeah, I bet you did.
I had to see how much I had to spare.
The real challenge.
So yeah, I just dealing with the temperature and trying to stay warm and the repeated music and stuff like that. So
yeah, so when after Jared's interrogation, I want to get into comparing y'all's, and you guys can both talk about what you're going through. But for now, we got to kind of hold back on that. So let's. I'm pretty jet lagged. You guys can throw in some more questions and we'll get to them. But unless you guys got some major stuff to add, we can begin wrapping this up.
I think the complete unknown for me, and I'm actually going to say that I was significantly more disadvantaged than Jared will end up being, because Jared, by the time he does the challenge, he has more experience as the hunter going around and seeing the terrain and stuff like me, and like Jared knows where the end point is as the hunter when he goes. I didn't know any of that stuff. I didn't know where the end point was. I didn't know how far I had to travel, what the terrain was going to be like. So it was just complete unknown for me when I started. Hell, I didn't even know what direction I was heading in when I first, escaped from the interrogation camp. So I think I got the, of course I'm biased, but I think I got the bigger, SERE experience in terms of like trying to evade and escape, because like I didn't know shit. I didn't have a watch. I couldn't tell time. It was, the sun would come out, but it was also like somewhat of an overcast. So it's like I couldn't even really tell where the sun was in the sky at times. And the whole time I'm going through this, I'm thinking like the end point is fucking maybe 10, 20 miles away. I don't know. I'm deaf. It's not a question of like, if I'm going to set up shop for the night, it's when, right. And at several points I'm like looking at like, oh, that would actually be a good area to, build a stealth camp site, so that's a lot of the stuff that's going through my mind as I'm going through this. Is not just like, hey, am I going to continue on for the night? It's like, hey, at some point I'm going to have to stop, build a shelter, build a fire, because that temperature is going to get back down into 19 degrees. And, if I don't do these survival tasks, like it's going to be brutal.
All right, here's a question for you. Brent, how did you feel when you could hear the enemy radio comms?
Oh, that's nerve wracking, guys. Again, it's like you have no idea where the hunter is, and you have in your mind that like, hey, he's just on the other side of this terrain feature. He's just over there behind that tree, just waiting for you to walk out so that he can come running out. And your mind starts playing tricks on you, like I was already talking about. You start seeing stumps that you think are, the hunter. or one of the scouts. So, just adding on top of the intercom, the loud hailer and, hearing radio traffic, like they're close at that point. So it's like, fuck, it's like, you don't want to stay still for too long because that the hunter every hour is getting an intel update. At least I was assuming so, because I was getting, as a survivor, I was getting an intel update. So, it's common sense. Like if I'm getting this, the hunter's getting something very similar. Right. And then I remember from season 1 what the hunter got. So, it's like, you don't want to be stationary for too long because fuck, the enemy's getting that intel and they're going to be coming to that location, presumably. So when you start hearing radio comms and you're, immobile and staying stationary, you're like, crap, it's only a matter of time before the hunter is on top of you.
Yeah, so I like how you mentioned the stumps. I get that a lot out there. I've run into black bears out there a couple times, and I get that a lot where I'm coming around a cut in a mountain on a road, and I'm thinking like, it'd suck if I came into this cut into a mountain and there's nowhere for a bear to go, and I just drive right up onto it. And as I'm thinking that, I come around the turn and there's like a big black charred stump sitting there, and I'm like, well, shit, there it is, but it's not a bear. So at this point, how much water? So you sat down and ate a power bar, but how much water you got left?
Maybe a quarter of a canteen. So, and I was being I was drinking sparingly throughout the duration of the challenge, because obviously I only got one canteen. I got to make it last. And I didn't once come across any water source. I crossed a pretty big dry creek when I went over that big log, that fallen log. But there was no water source over there. I remember some guy made a comment like, he didn't get any type of water purification. I'm like, it wouldn't have done me any good, man. There was no fucking water out there. The only water I had was the water I had on my person. That was it. So
if you go out there that time of year and don't take your own water and you get lost, you're done.
Yeah.
There's just nothing there.
Those dry creek beds, I mean, you'd have to dig for days to get down to any kind of moisture. Everything's overflowing right now. And up until May, most of those creeks they have something in there. But so if you think about, the effort you're putting into it. So like I said, you're at 1,800 feet of elevation gain now. Like for people who haven't hiked or done anything like this, that's pretty extreme. Also, a lot of it's on your stomach crawling. So you got. Did you drink a quarter, or do you have a quarter left? I misunderstood what you said.
Oh, I had like 1/4 of my canteen left at this point in the challenge.
So okay, so you're not even halfway there yet, and you're getting low on water.
Yeah. I definitely have more than or less than half a canteen left at this point. So in my head, I'm picturing myself, because I know there's only one more episode right before the end of my run. So yeah. I'm like, in my head, it's like 3/4 of the way there. So
right, but as this is going on out there, you don't know where the hell you are yet, and you don't know how much far you got left. So you're going off of the real time. You got what grunt math? You're 6 hours in, and you've drank half your canteen already. That's pretty serious.
I can't stress enough. Like, I was drinking my water sparingly. Like, we did that gear loadout video pretty recently. Where you were one of the judges in that, and I'm watching all these guys comment like, "Oh, I drink lots of water and blah 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 blah," and fucking you better change your routine, buddy. I honestly, I think that's one of the things we do wrong in the U.S. military is we force hydration on guys, routinely to the point where it's unrealistic, right? Drinking canteen an hour on the hour. I think that's unrealistic hydration. And
you can't do that in field conditions.
No, in fact, during the invasion, we went from hydrating one canteen on the hour every hour to, once the invasion kicked off, one canteen a day. That's all you got. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, as a young Lance Corporal, like, why did they fucking train us like this? Like, why did they train us and force us to drink in a canteen every hour on the hour? And then the war kicks off and they limit us to only one canteen an hour because all of our water was in the AAV. Like, resupply was a thing, right? It was challenged. And so I feel like we train troops wrong. Like we force guys to drink water because of all your possible heat casualty guys. Like, that's the solution. Like, force those dudes to keep drinking so they don't go down as a heat cat. Well, you need to condition your body to move and operate on less water. So I correct that by drinking metric fuck tons of coffee, and I feel like I require less water than your average bear. But even then, going through that terrain, I was towards the end of this competition, like I'm about ready to run out of water. And again, I don't know how far away the endpoint is. So I was about to get to the point where, like, I don't have any more water. I'm running dry, and I'm gonna have to make do. So
Yeah, I always hated that forced hydration. You're conditioning people the wrong way because your body gets used to that.
agreed.
Totally. It's just like people doing all this combat fitness stuff. They always get their pre-workout and their intra workout and their post-workout. And it's like, dude, our firefights, man, we'd be black on water during it, and after that, it's like, you don't get picked up and go home. You walk your ass home with no protein powders, none of that shit. So I think I was in the same boat, man. They conditioned us to always have water and food. And in actual combat, when it wasn't there, we turned into a bunch of crybabies.
Yeah. I mean, same is true with chow. In training, you get 3 MREs a day, and it's like 3 MREs a day. and then the war, the invasion of Iraq kicks off, and we're down to 1 MRE a day. And it's like we're starving. So,
yeah.
If I could add on to the water thing there, Randall, whenever you showed me doing right before my area relocate, and I'm drinking from the canteen there, and Bill's talking to me, that's actually the first water I had that day. I didn't drink any of my water up until that point, and that was me as the hunter. And I was trying to conserve my water just because I didn't want to be bothered, so to speak, with trying to have a resupply every couple hours or whatever, and taking me away from chasing Brent through this crap. So I was conserving my water as much as I could, so I didn't have to worry about a resupply. Even though I knew I could have as much as I want as the hunter, I didn't want that resupply to slow me down either.
Yeah, that makes sense. But you could have bugged Bill or the other guy nonstop if you wanted to.
Oh yeah, absolutely, I could have, and I knew that. But yeah, so when I drank that from that canteen up there right before my relocate, I should have said, I drank an entire canteen right there, and probably a little bit more, and then refilled to take another full canteen with me. Because I didn't want the resupplies to take away from anything that I was trying to do out there.
Yeah, it makes sense. And in case people don't realize it, you as the hunter, you have to be tactical and stealthy as well. So if you got Bill or the other guy coming out there every 30 minutes to hand you stuff, they're just traipsing through the woods, making a bunch of noise. So yeah, I get that. You're trying to stay focused. All right. So what you guys throw in your final questions, and we'll try to get to them, but we're up near the end point. Brent doesn't know he's that close to it yet, but Jared is relocated up there and he's looking at the drone. So now that you know the psychological effect of the drone, it kind of messed with the survivor at all, but did it help you at all, Jared, on your side?
Not knowing what Brent was feeling, or if I was even having the drone fly close to him, no. Visually, no, it did not help at all. You could not see well enough on the little screen that was on the phone that the drone footage was on to be able to discern what anything was out there other than trees and down trees and whatnot. Psychologically for Brent, I think it makes you hunker down and just kind of stay there for a while until you don't hear it anymore. But but visually, no, it had no effect on what I was doing.
All right. Yeah, that's kind of the theme we're getting. So there's a couple ways to rectify that, and one is definitely just to do the free range drone thing, since we're flying it all the time anyway, and that'll just kind of put more pressure on the survivor. You know, we could get larger screens, but I don't think that would help too much, because the way that terrain is and the shadows on these cameras, you know, like later on you can see pretty well on the drone, but looking at any screen out there in the daylight, it's really tough. So
I think if you had a dedicated drone operator and that was his whole job the entire time, is just to fly the drone around the whole area and just kind of report back what he sees. You know, if he does goes out and does a grid search with it, and that's all he does, is that might have a little bit more effect. But to take me out of the field to come out and do a drone search like that is not effective, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this, you know, when we were all shooting the shit after the competition was over, is, you know, I would say just include the drone flyover in addition to enemy intel update as a perk, and then, like Jared just said, a scout flies it. I think that would be a tremendous asset, because of the psychological effect on the survivor. And it's not like, as a survivor, it's like, oh, the drone's useless completely. No, it's not useless. You can't move out in the open. Like, if you're going to move, you got to move under, you know, cover, overhead cover, right? You got to have concealment overhead. Otherwise that drone will see you. So,
yeah. And knowing that, you know, whoever's operating it, they can use that intel. So it's going to affect you a little bit. That's probably going to be the course of action for that in the future, is just have that one a free for all, and it's just extra pressure on the guy. Hopefully we could get some with some better optics and have more fun with it. So pretty much, Jared, you're up here, you're up there at the endpoint, and the clock's ticking. So people should be able to tell that it's that winter sun is starting to fade away a little bit. So you're up there using the drone, but you're also kind of setting in. So what are people expecting in the next episode? Are you up there for good in a LPOP, just to try to wait for Brent, or what?
Yeah, so I was getting my normal intel updates after that, and I could, from the intel updates, he was getting closer to the endpoint and moving in my direction. So, not that I wanted to sit there at the endpoint, but I did go a little ways away from it and set up, because I knew he was moving in that direction. I knew he was south of the endpoint, south of me there at the endpoint. So it was just trying to figure out where to get set up, and how the terrain and the foliage and everything was going to direct him coming up that ridge right there, to the endpoint, is kind of where dictated me to where I was going to set up at. So at that point, it was getting to the afternoon, mid-afternoon or so, and I don't want to go too much into the next episode, but that's pretty much where I set up at there now.
All right, Brent, this is an awesome question. If Brent had not been disarmed, would he have shot down the drone?
hell no. They
No?
give my position away? No, absolutely not.
That's a good point. It would have made for an awesome video showing our drone nosedive. But I mean, you'd need a shotgun with birdshot or something. But
yeah. Plus, you know, I had a little pistol. You know, presumably, if this is a real SERE challenge, you know, Jared would have been armed with a freaking, you know, M4 carbine with a goddamn M203 40mm grenade launcher underneath it. God knows what else.
Yeah, recon by fire. Yeah, see, we covered that a while ago. Hearing a person walking around through there creeping, it's pretty hard. But, you know, Brent, you talked about hearing the drone and the quads, and Bill on the bullhorn. Like, that sound travels. Like, I know for me, when I'm out there, if I hear a dirt bike or something, it sounds like it's in your area for, you know, 30 minutes. It'll be flying by, but it sounds like it's super close. And then it sounds like it's right on top of you. So, yeah, gunfire. Yeah, that's definitely a giveaway.
Well, you can tell when I'm sitting there and I'm laying on the ground and I got the radio and Bill's on the loud hailer. like it sounds like he's right around the corner. I mean, the audio on him talking while I'm laying there is like clear as day. Like there's no question, you know exactly what he's saying because he's like that close, right? That's how much that sound travels. You know, if you look at the map and see where he is in relation to me, like there's a little bit of distance there, and it sounds like he's right around the corner on my screen. So it was loud.
Yeah, there's probably 20 minutes of that, but you know, I just took the best parts. But Bill, I got to tell Jeff from last year, he's got to up his bullhorn game because Bill definitely took him out this year. Bill was going nuts with that thing.
Bill was taunting me with Whataburger. You guys don't know that's a big deal in Texas.
Yeah, so you know that's another one of those things. In the future one, that bullhorn we might use. I can't give it away, but there's, you know, talking about food and stuff. There's other ways you can utilize that to definitely psyop the freaking survivor. Like make him think there's some real world shit going on. That's one way to do it. So we didn't do it this time, but because yeah, we already stressed Brent out. But we might do something like that in the future.
Well, I mean, and I'm going to mention this because it happened in this episode. I mean, you got somebody yelling on a loud hailer. Like, you're not going in that direction. You know what I mean? It's just like you just set up a loud hailing wall in whatever direction, and you know that's one way to help funnel people. If you're trying to channelize them into a certain direction, like that's one way to do it. Put a dude there with that loud hailer, and he ain't going that direction no more, for sure. So
right, and so I put the footage of Bill driving in there. So how long did you hear his ATV before you started hearing him talk on the bullhorn?
I had heard the ATV rolling up, and that's what initially got me to stop. And when I heard that sound, that's what made me think that there was a trail right in front of me, right? Because I'm looking the terrain, how it looked. It looked like there was a flat area in front of me. So when I heard that ATV, I was like, "Oh fuck, he's driving. This is a trail right in front of me. He's coming right down this trail." So I started to move out of it into a clearing area to make my way down there. But when I heard that, I had to run back and jump back into like the more vegetated area to hide because I thought the ATV was coming down this trail in front of me, which actually turned out to be a creek, so a dry creek bed. So,
all right, let's try to figure this one out. I have this figured out for the end of your run, but at the end of this episode, how long have you been awake? So it was what, about 6 or 7 you got up the day before?
Yeah, Central Time. So then, you know, I go to California. That's, you know, plus 2 hours on my clock, right? So whatever time it was that, you know, they threw a wool blanket at me. You got to remember that, you know, it might have been 1:30 in the morning, but it was actually 3:30 on my body. So, and then you guys got me up, or what time did I make my escape? Like 5, 6 in the morning.
6.
I can't remember.
Almost 6 on the dot.
So that was, you know, a couple hours of sleep. If I slept, I don't know. I can't tell. It's like laying there, like you got that Christmas morning child, you know, excitement. So it's like, I don't know if I was sleeping or not.
Yeah, I think if I calculated it for the next episode coming up, and if I go off of that, I'm thinking about 34 hours. That's what I calculated, because I asked you what time you got up at your place before coming out. So,
and that would make a lot of sense in terms of like why I felt internally it was a lot later than it actually was, right?
Yeah.
With the overcast and stuff and not being able to see the sun. Like in my head, it was like, you know, when it was afternoon, I was thinking it was like fucking 4 p.m., you know, 1600. So that probably played a huge factor in that as well.
Yeah, and that goes back to the question we had earlier about the guy knowing it's training and it's all fake and all that. Like, dude, sleep deprivation is no joke. If you want to mess with a guy and throw off his skills and his motivation, like deprive him of sleep. Sleep and being warm. That's definitely that definitely messed me up in the grunt days. If I was cold and tired, I was a pretty pissy grunt. So yeah, we got Brent both ways. We got him cold as shit from Texas. He's in 20 and 19 degree weather, and he's tired. and then eventually he's hungry. So I think, again, we could have waterboarded him for extra fun, but I think I think he was pretty upset with us. I was starting to wonder if you were actually gonna, get a hold of one of the guns and shoot us for real at some point.
Well, Stoker had that AR and it was in the corner, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, if they walk out, am I supposed to grab this and make my escape that way, or?
Yeah, we came up with safe words and all that, but I don't think I told you any of it. I think we just kind of rolled with it.
I tell you guys, like it's hard to put in perspective how little I knew.
Yeah, I want to keep it in the dark. It's funny. A lot of the critiques I get from friends and family, they watch the first episode and they're like, "Dude, you don't know this guy. He's out there armed, and you pull this shit on him. Like, what would you have done if he would have shot at you guys?" I'm like, "Well, we probably would have told him to stop." But it's like, I mean,
Stoker's got a sucking chest wound. Like, Brent, calm.
keep the cameras rolling, man.
Yeah.
I mean, if if you win the SERE challenge that way by killing your captors, I guess that's a way to do it. But that's it. It worked out, and I mentioned it that they teach us when you should look for your windows of escape, and priority number one is while you're being captured. But your buddy had just been executed right in front of you, so. I've seen some hero comments from guys, but I know if I got 2 AR-15 platforms trained on me and they just showed they're willing to use it, I'm not going to try to outrun those. So that was a pretty good setup. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of part of it. Like, don't get shot by the contestant when you're surprising him. We didn't know you were armed either. That's another thing. So that's about as real as it gets. Brent was he did not know what was going to happen because we didn't know he'd have a fucking gun on him.
Yeah. AAR point there for next season.
Yeah. Well, Stoker went over with the other bad guy. He went over search procedures. So it's a good thing they caught it. That would have been a bummer while you were in captivity if you broke out of your shit and pulled your pistol out. That would have made for an awesome show, like all of a sudden Bill is tied up in a chair.
Or if I had shot a bear out there, started cooking a bear, I was a survivor.
Yeah. That'd be cool, man. All right. So we got any final questions? Otherwise, we're going to wrap this up. So episode 5 is next Sunday, and it's getting close to if Brent's going to make it or not.
I do want to mention some Jared, because I don't think the footage was used at all. But when I took off, all I had was a base layer under my utilities, and a little ways into the challenge, I was coming to the realization again, like it wasn't a question of if I was going to stay or have to build a shelter for the night. It was when, right? And I knew that temperature was going to go down back into the 19s. At night. So pretty early on, I had stripped off that base layer I had. So now I just have my camis on. Just like Jared stripped off his warming layers. Like I had taken that stuff off and put it away. Even though it was still chilly outside, I knew that was going to be the only warming layer I had. And I knew that the more I moved and continued to move, I was going to get sweaty. So if I had got those base layers sweaty, and I tried to put them on at night when the temperature dropped, like I'd be freezing my fucking ass off. So knowing that was going to be my only warming layer, I actually took those off, and it was cold when it was still cold, and put them in my butt pack so that I'd have those for later. So that was just something that I wanted to share. It's like that was my thinking. Like I'm going to need these later, so I can't wear these right now. I'm going to have to embrace the suck right now, so that I have them later and they're dry and not, soaked from being sweaty from all the movement I was going to be doing throughout the day.
Yeah. All right. So what's your strategy on staying warm, Jared?
Actually, I didn't really get cold out there at all. The only time I was cold was on my quad ride down to where Brent escaped from. and I made sure I had my my Gore-Tex jacket, if I could learn how to talk, with the liner on it inside of it. But once I got down there, I took that off and passed that off. So as soon as I started running up the hill on the last episode after Brent, I had my base layers on, my grid fleeces or whatever they are. I was warm. 3 minutes into it, I was already starting to get warm. When I got up to the top of the hill, I did a SEALs check and just did a little OPLP up there, and I was still really warm at that point. And it wasn't until later on that Bill came by that I took those off. And so after I took them off, I think it was probably 45 or 50 degrees at that point, and I just had my camis on. But I was not cold at all the entire first day when we were out there, when I was out there chasing Brent. Not one time was I cold. My hands might have got a little chilly at times, but that was about it.
Yeah. Did the weather affect how long your OPs were at all? Like, did you sit and listen for stuff and then get cold and decide to move again?
Not really. No, I was pretty comfortable the whole time. Sometimes I was a little bit too warm even without my base layer with just the camis on. But once I start moving, I warm up pretty quick. And if going into a night routine, I was not planning on stopping just because I wanted to stay warm. I wasn't going to stop the entire night.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I think that's it on questions, man. So we'll wrap this up. So we're coming up toward the end. So is Brent gonna make it? We will find out. Brent, what is your final strategy coming up into the next episode? You still got plenty of time. I'm not gonna give it away, but what's going through your mind at this point?
So again, guys, I have no clue where that endpoint is. Like, again, I'm thinking it's like fucking 10, 20 miles away from me. So at this point, I'm trying to get as far as I can while the sun's still up, and trying to make as much ground as humanly possible. And as I'm moving and I'm getting closer, I'm feeling like the sun's going down. We're getting later in the day. So right now I'm starting to get into that point where it's like, okay, I need to find a good suitable area to stealth camp, right? I'm going to have to build a shelter. I'm going to have to make a fire. So I'm kind of in my head getting to that point where, like, I'm thinking that it's a lot later in the day, and eventually I'm going to have to use some of my precious sunlight time to build this shelter before the sun actually goes down. And then once that shelter is constructed, maybe hunker down for, a few hours, and then make the rest of the movement at night. So that's what's going on in my brain housing group at the moment.
All right, Jared, how are you going to stop Brent going further?
At this point, I'm just hoping that he's going to cross in front of me at some point. I'm getting ready to set up there at the end point, and just hoping that I can hear him coming, and just hoping he crosses in front of me so I can spring on him and get to him.
All right. Well, I keep killing Jared. There he is. All right. So that'll do it, guys. Thanks for tuning in for this one. And we'll see you guys next Sunday, same time for episode 5. And then the chat after that one. So I think episode 5 is going to be definitely one you don't want to miss. Not to give anything away, but yeah, don't miss that one. So,
well, you know what else? You know what else happens after episode 5? I'm coming for you, Jared.
All right, guys. See you everybody next week. Thanks.